Hello, Michelle.
Hi, Elisa. I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing fine. How's Eric doing? Hi, sweetie. I love you.
He says, "Hi, Mom, I love you." And he's doing awesome. He's very, very excited. And he was just before we connected today, his energy came really, really fast, like running up to me. And I started to sit in my seat like this, like
Mhm.
side to side. I started to like wiggle in my seat and get excited, and I could feel my heart chakra connecting and him very excited to see you. And he also says, he said, "Mom, I'm giving you a great big bear hug." He
Oh,
wants to know that you're getting a bear hug from him today.
I can see him doing the wigglies. He was a wiggly kid.
Yeah, he's like very,
Uh-huh.
yeah.
Okay, I love you. All right, we're going to do part two, our final part of emotions of non-humans. So
Yes,
we'll
yes.
never figure out the emotions of humans, so why bother with that? But I think this is going to be kind of short, but uh, okay. Let's talk about dolphins. I mean, we talked about the emotions in general of mammals, but I don't know. There are some dolphins that humans seem to connect. I mean, yes, some mammals that humans seem to connect to a little bit better. So, dolphins, can you
Hmm.
talk about the emotions of them?
He says, yeah, it says, "Mom, interestingly enough, along with the primates, the dolphins are the most like we are." He's just saying that they have ability, or it's their consciousness is closer to ours, or able to perceive closer to ours.
Okay.
He's talking about some of the makeup being similar. He's also saying that they have, what do you mean, Eric, like interdimensional? He's like saying like an ancient species.
Oh,
Like there's
wow.
more to them. There's more to them than what we understand. They're such an important part of our ecosystem, but he says they're far more intelligent than what the current tools or the current studies are able to. Okay, yeah, and he means emotionally.
Oh,
He also says that um, not all mammals are the same. It also depends on, well, he says in the wild that they're known to do things. They're known to swim with the boats. They're known to come up to people. But he says that you will have some that will develop relationships. He's talking about there being instances where people have reported um, seeing the same dolphin or having the same relationship with the dolphin in their area or where they would frequent in some sort of harbor or something. And he says, and that's because they have that longing for emotional connection. They have that same thing that we as human beings have, that longs for connection. Regardless of what anything else is going on, we always have that longing for um, the emotional connection, the emotional intelligence.
well, I saw, I think it was on Unusual Animal Friends or something like that. There was this dog in, I don't know, Ireland or someplace that used to jump into the water every morning to go swim with this dolphin who was a buddy. The dolphin would show up, and when the dog would just swim all day, and sometimes the dolphin had to buoy him up and carry him back to and help him get back to shore.
Oh,
So
that's sweet.
yeah, it was
That's
really
cute.
sweet. So I guess that's that too. So what do you mean this historic? Were they part of Atlantis? Were they from another dimension? I mean, what's that all about?
So he says both, that they are interdimensional. So he's talking about them being ancient, being back in Lemurian, Atlantean times. He also says if you look at a good example is just to look at what's put on a lot of spiritual text and tarot cards, or he says more oracle cards. They always show mermaids with dolphins. They
Oh,
always show, you'll often see a dolphin that is, has some sort of meaning of fertility or abundance. He says that goes back to that they are interdimensional,
What do you
and
mean by that? They
they
come from
exist.
another dimension, or they can
Yeah,
go.
they can.
Can a dolphin here go to another dimension?
Yes,
Okay,
they're interdimensional,
got it.
but there is another realm where they exist, so that they are the same creature.
Oh,
And he says, so whereas with mermaids, and you get into a little different situation where we don't have, they're not on the same dimension
okay.
as us. Yeah.
Ah, that's why we never see them, I guess, huh?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. What about horses? Some people have a real big connection, especially little girls. You know how it is.
Oh, he says absolutely. He's saying that a lot of animals like horses, cats, dogs. He's even showing me ducks,
Oh,
pigs. A lot of them have more intelligence and emotional intelligence than some give credit for. But horses do. They do carry natural bonds. They do carry bonds with. Oh, okay. So there's healing with children. He says there's a lot of spiritual contracts between children and horses.
ooh,
It also has a meaning of, yes, as a free spirit, um, it's able to connect with the inner child in someone. So a lot of adults that really appreciate horses, like to ride horses or admire horses, are also connecting with the inner spirit of themselves. And horses have he says, a magical sense to them. They always have had a mysterious sense to them. And he says that we get that from looking at them. They have very human eyes,
yeah.
the way that they look at you. And Erik says, have you ever stared down a horse, Mom? Have you ever gone to eye with a horse?
Well, I didn't have any staring contests with them, but why? What happens?
Well, he said, try it sometime. He says it's very interesting to see what telepathically you can receive, because they are very curious, and they do connect on an emotional uh, emotion. He says an emotional intelligence that is only, he says it's limited. So like we have with our cats and dogs, there's like a limited amount of the consciousness, or how far it goes.
Okay.
Um, he's also saying that horses have a commonality that we also have with human beings, or we as human beings have, which is with scarring, or with emotional scarring. Because he's talking about, if you look at how if a horse is abused, or a horse has been abandoned, or anything else like that, how much work and how much effort. He says there's sanctuaries and people that dedicate their lives
Oh, yeah.
to helping these horses.
Yeah.
And so he said, that's something that as human beings as well, that we can connect with that. Because if you look at someone who has been themselves through emotional abuse and scarring, physical abuse of any type, that it takes a lot of work for us to go through that. So he's just saying that that's something that we have in common, and that horses, the way that they're built, the way that they're structured, that this is something that they it's a little more than, say, some other animals.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do they have healing abilities? Is that what you said before?
Yes. He says
That's what
that.
a really good equine therapy is super good
Yes.
for autistic kids and
Yes.
other disabled kids or people.
Yes. And he says that's that magical ability. Horses do have a sense of awe and wonder for children, because he's calling them majestic looking creatures. And
The
often
horse?
horses, mhm,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. They
yeah.
are.
And he says, especially to a small child who looks up at a horse at how large they are. He also says that they have a presence to them, and they are often portrayed in like children's storybooks and nursery rhymes, and He's saying like Disney movies and all those sorts of things. So children get this sense of like just wonderment and magic when it comes to horses, but horses also do have this innate ability, and a lot of them do have spiritual agreements, or he said spiritual contracts to help a child, help a situation, a family. There's
awesome.
always some sort of a connection. And Erik says, just look at all the stories that you can read, or all the movies you can read about somebody and a horse.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Okay, what about chimps and gorillas emotionally?
Yeah, he said again, now he's actually seeing the dolphins have a bit more of, they're a bit more expanded. It's just a slightly different too. So he doesn't really want to relate it as one is smarter than another or anything else like that. It's not really like that. He's saying that they're a bit different. Now he says that although the primates have a lot of similarities to human beings, they also have more of an instinct. They're more of he says we're not accustomed to using our instincts in the same way. And so they are very instinct driven. And so their emotions, he's saying they only go so far, but they do experience loss. They do experience grief. They do experience loneliness. And he says, again, it also depends on where they would be located, like what's their story, what is their purpose. Were they here to have a lifetime to experience as a gorilla, to be in the natural habitat, the natural ecosystem, or were they a gorilla like we've talked to before, like Coco, who had an experience that was in captivity and had a relationship and was able in that way to help study. It depends on a lot of different things, but that's just kind of an overall.
Oh, that's cool. What about pigs? They're kind of interesting. I mean, they say their DNA is kind of close to ours, and that's why we use like porcine, we used to, insulin and porcine heart valves and things like that.
Did you say pigs?
Pigs. Uh-huh.
Pigs. He says, and this is something that causes a lot of controversy because, you know, we understand that they do have feelings and emotions. And he says, again, it does depend on the animal. There are some that are not the same as others, but they do have an ability to love. They do have an instinct and ability to bond, and they do have habit. So he's saying that bond over time. So a pig can get to know a family, can follow a family member, can recognize certain people, can wag its tail in excitement to receive a treat or anything else like that.
So wait, back in when you talk about the primates, you said they rely on instincts more than we do. I'm wondering if that's because humans adopted an actual verbal and mental language.
Yes.
And that made us rely more on that instead of our intuition. It seems like if you can't verbalize, then you're going to really listen to your inner voice more.
Yeah, he says that's right, Mom. He says that's exactly right. So it has a lot to do with the evolution. And he says once language enters the communication, then we're in a whole new expansion of consciousness. Language changes everything.
Okay. When an animal is domesticated, any animal, do their emotions change at all? Or, I mean, are domesticated cats and dogs and things like that different than their wild counterparts as far as emotions are concerned?
Erik says kind of. Their focus is different. So he says where one is domesticated, often their life purpose is different. And so they will be primed to have that bond with a human being, and they will learn from the human being because the human being already has an expanded consciousness. So they're learning, growing, and evolving. Whereas an animal that's in the wild, he says a lot of times those life purposes are very much to be in that ecosystem to be away from human interaction and to be able to experience the balance of the ecosystem, and just rely, he says, on intuition, on instinct, and to only have like cross species communication.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about birds and, the emotions of birds. And, there are the raptors like hawks and owls and eagles and stuff. And there's the non-raptors. So I kind of want to know if there are any differences, I mean, in general about birds, and also the difference between the raptors and the non-raptors.
Erik, I said, Erik, I don't want to say this because it sounds like I'm insulting birds. But he goes, well, now we're going to talk about the bird brains. So,
Yeah.
And he says they're very intelligent. Depending on the species, what they're capable of doing. He's talking about that. Like domesticated, or ones that we can have as domesticated, again, it follows the same type of thing that he was saying about any other animal and species. Right. That if you have a bird or anything in captivity, it's going to learn habits, it's going to be able to create bonds, whereas in the wild, it has a love for its young. But he says, as a bird, the instinct then becomes to leave the young, then becomes to separate. So there's not that emotional bond in that sense. Although he says, there are instances, and he says that he wants to impress that everything you hear is not a solid, that's the way it always is, and it can never be any other way. So he says it's really important to remember when you're hearing these things, because I mean, he goes, we live in a world of creation, and he says animals are manifesting as well. Wow. Animals are also doing that. So he says, so never put a label on that could never happen, or I don't believe that. Okay. So he wants to add that to it for some reason.
Well, okay, you have some birds that pair up for life, like whooping cranes, and some, maybe, I don't know if all, but some penguins. Is that like they can actually love, or is that purely instinct?
He's saying that it's very instinct driven, but he says that there's bond to it. So it's where they are, it's what they would express as love. We wouldn't compare it to the same way that we would say that we experience love.
But can they feel fondness, for example?
Yes, they can, because he said, and you'll notice this in many different species where some animals just may not prefer another animal. Okay. Because we see this in dogs and cats, where
that's true.
Some of them just get along great and they're the best of friends, and other ones just really can't stand the smell or sight of each other. Oh my God. He says it really does depend.
Okay. So what about the really intelligent birds like African grays, ravens, crows, things like that? I mean, they say crows and ravens, they got the intelligence for like 3-year-olds, or and that they have funerals and things like that. They mourn their dead. Can you talk about that?
He just used the word niftiness and cleverness.
Oh, okay.
That they're very clever.
Okay.
They're very, he says how they can, he's talking about how their patterns are. They're very clever. There's a bit of a memory to them as well, a little bit of a memory. But he also said that they do have groups, or they must go into groups or sleep in groups, because he's showing them going together. And he says that if there is one sick, or if some get sick, that they do experience, he's calling it a difference in their behavior. But he's saying that it's more instinctive. He's putting more of an energy on their cleverness, survival skills.
Okay. And we're talking about crows and ravens for the most part, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, what about like an African gray? They're so smart, these parrots, or just the parrot family in general.
Yeah, he says they are a little different. He also said how they are built, the type of birds that they are. He goes, okay, explain it this way. If we were to look at dog breeds, and he says, there are some dog breeds that are known to be really easy to train to do this or do that. And, maybe one dog breed heals really well, or another one does tricks really well, or one's known for being really intelligent or hunting. So he says, so if we apply that the same to the birds, these birds, they tend to bond really well with the same family. They can go through a lot of stress. He says conditions are really important for these birds, especially when they're being kept as a pet, because they don't have that natural habitat. So they depend on their normalcy. They depend on their people. And he says, so they can build, they are very smart. He says that he says the repetitiveness also does have some knowing to it, because I just asked him, do they just say it because they hear it and they have the ability just to make the sound, or is there actually something behind that? And he says that there is, because he says if you even look on YouTube, you'll see videos of people like somebody crying, or somebody having an action, and where they seem to respond to it, where it's not so much of a word, but they're sensing something in somebody. So he said that they don't, so to speak, maybe behave quite as a dog or cat would, but he says any person that has owned a bird or a parrot would stand up very tall and say, I absolutely know that my bird loves me. I know that, because they do have they do create a bond, and that also comes over time with habit. And he says they're like, when they're in the right conditions, they can live a really long time in family.
And it seems like a lot of the tropical birds, individually, like one will prefer only males and the other will prefer only female humans. It's weird. Anyway, I don't mean to ask a question about that. So, I forgot about raptors. Is there anything significantly different emotionally of raptors and with other birds? Like owls, eagles, hawks?
He's just showing, again, like what he was talking about with the crows, not about a sharpness, about them having a very specific instinct, like more like a prey instinct to them, and that overdrives other things. And like just with the crows, it might be like a different type of prey or what they go after, but he says crows have a little bit of manipulative behavior too.
My God. Yeah. All right. Let's talk about reptiles and amphibians.
Okay. So, so he's showing me like a lizard, and he's showing me if somebody has a pet lizard, and he's not saying that they don't become attached in the sense that they become familiar and comfortable with their human. Some species are more friendly than others, but it's not the same type of love that a human being would project. So let's say someone has a lizard, that lizard is feeling more comfortable with the fact that it's used to feeling this warm body that it's leaning up against. Rather than thinking that, oh my goodness, Angie is the best lizard owner ever, and I'm so glad I have as an owner. So he says it's not really quite that way. He's also saying the same for what's that?
People really adore their pet snakes. It's weird.
And he says it's not that they don't, like, all creatures have their habits and their quirks and their likes and their dislikes. And again, it's all about the environment and the nurturing and the time that you're willing to spend with an animal to be able, or whatever your creature is, he says, to be able to help them expand their consciousness.
Well, what about?
So,
Oh, go ahead.
I was just saying, he said that you can work with them and help them, just like anyone, help them reach their potential.
Okay. Well, what about those reptiles and amphibians that are not pets, that are in the wild? Something interesting about their emotions at all?
So he is showing that with alligators, like alligators having like a motherly bond. It feels maternal with
Oh,
the
I
baby.
channeled that. When you said alligators, I thought motherly bond. Wow.
Yes. Yeah, having a maternal bond. And he says that that is so he's saying that so if you look at that on a scale, there's some that might have a little bit of that, but he says it's not in the wild. It really isn't quite the same, that they are a little bit different type of a creature.
Okay.
And again, he's showing them being very instinct driven.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, the alligator, he says, there's that mama bear protective
Okay.
bond.
All right. Let's talk. Oh, what about dinosaurs? What kind of emotional capacity did they have?
He actually just gave me a visual of two what would you call them, Eric? He says long necks.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and wrapping like this,
Oh, yeah.
like going around each other like that.
And he said, heart.
Yeah. He said that they would bond, they would mate, and they would bond. And he says again, we're looking at okay, some of the, okay, tell me this one first. Okay, some of the smaller, he's showing me like a little tiny dinosaur with a lot of feathers and really big teeth.
Okay.
I don't know quite what this is called, but these ones, he's calling them that they mate, that they look for a mate, and that they would fight. They would get very jealous over mates. And but again, it's not. It was very primal in the sense that it's not that I love her, she's mine, or that the dinosaurs would court each other or anything else like that. It's not quite the same. But he is showing that the T-Rex has a very similar energy as the alligator.
Oh, okay.
Has a very similar energy, that same type of motherly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, what about insects? Their emotional capacity, and are any of the species of insects different from the other species of insects?
He showed me, and this is really interesting, he just showed me a little ladybug. And he said that ladybugs have a, this isn't really quite emotional though, Eric, but okay. But he says, okay, because there's a lot of focus put on ladybugs. Okay. And so he's talking about energetically, there's like an attraction that ladybugs have with human beings.
Oh.
It's like some sort of because they're pretty. He says that they ladybugs is a sign of good luck, so people often have a fond feeling for ladybugs. And he's just saying that that's
scared to death of ladybugs. I don't know why.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's funny. He says, yeah, there's nothing scarier than a big bad ladybug.
Oh, yeah.
But okay, so is there any other ones, Eric? He says, he goes, now I hate to be the one to say it this way, but he goes, when somebody uses the word or the phrase about as smart as a gnat, or that type of thing, like the brain of a gnat.
Right.
He's just saying that there's not that capacity there, that they're more of breeding. Now he did say that there's a little bit more of a social awareness, or an awareness of other beings when we get to like grasshoppers.
Okay.
and some of those other bugs, caterpillars,
Mhm.
also have a slight awareness, but he says not on an emotional intelligence scale.
Then butterflies? No.
No, and he says butterflies have a little bit of a magical, because again he's tying the butterflies to what he said with the dolphins and
Oh,
everything in the earlier part, and he said that butterflies is something that is a spiritual symbol, and spirits often use butterflies and will use energy to, he says, not really the butterfly that's the spirit, it's the energy that's being projected to the butterfly
okay.
to communicate or to to kind of edge them over to go in front of somebody or have some sort of experience in that sense.
Yeah,
But he said that
dragonflies the same. Yeah, right?
yes, that's exactly what he was just going to say, was dragonflies are the same. Yeah,
Wow. Because
yeah,
I remember right soon, relatively soon after you died, Papa went racing, and there was this one dragonfly that just would sit on his shoulder for a long period of time, go away, come back for 3 days.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Eric says, yep. He says, I'm well aware of that one. That
Oh,
was Eric.
awesome.
Yeah.
That's cool. Why are they just easier to like maneuver like little drones?
Yeah, he says they're actually butterflies and dragonflies go back into ancient texts. They have an ancient,
Oh,
like a magical type energy to them. He says it's also, again, when we go into the law of attraction, when there's something that many people have a belief into and have a focus into, it starts to enhance that focus and
wow.
makes it like a totem, like something that's magical, something that's spiritual.
Sure.
And so when somebody gets a visit by a dragonfly, not only is it magical, but it doesn't happen very often when they come up to you in such a way where it's like, hey, that dragonfly seems awful friendly with me. Like it really wants to be around me a little bit. And he says, so it's like a unique, very beautiful specimen, just as our pure energy is.
Yeah. Okay. What about fish? I won't talk about cockroaches. They're gross. But do you talk about fish?
um, he said that okay, frogs, he's actually showing me that frogs have again, he's not saying it's very high on the emotional intelligence scale,
Mm-hmm.
but they have a companionship. Bullfrogs
Okay.
bullfrogs have a the way they mate, or how they stay together,
Okay.
or, or they, is that instinct as well, Eric? Okay, so he says that as far as anything as fish or anything else like that, he says the consciousness is the awareness is very minute. He's also calling it a okay, I don't know if this makes sense, but he's saying it to it like it's an empty vessel in a way.
Okay.
So it's like there's not something that's constantly there thinking.
Okay. Got it.
It's almost like he says, now remember that there's a little bit of a variance to the type of fish we're talking about.
Oh, yeah.
And he's showing me like little minnows and things like that. He goes, there are some bigger creatures, and it's a little bit different. But he says when we're talking about just some little fish, that like minnows and little fish in the lake, it's not quite the same as what we would imagine it would
Yeah.
be.
Yeah. What about sharks?
Sharks have, he says that they do have a little more emotional intelligence than what we would consider, say, a fish or anything else like that. Sharks are higher on the scale as a he says not quite like a dolphin, but their instinct to survive,
Mm-hmm.
and their to he's calling it like they protect themselves. They're either hunting or keeping to themselves.
Okay.
right? They're not actively, unless they're hungry or they're looking for food for some reason, they're not really out to get anybody.
Oh yeah.
And but he says that type of focus is what's front and center. He goes, although now there has been studies and that it has been shown that they do have preferences, or that there is like a mating, like different things that they do that might seem that it's a little more on a choosing type of way, or a shark that continues to return to a certain area or a boat. But he goes, it's nothing close to the way the dolphins are. Their instincts are much
Yeah,
more.
they seem like just eating machines, pretty much. All right, what about, let's go on to plants and trees and things like that. I mean, that whole book, and I told y'all about The Secret Life of Plants. I mean,
Yeah.
it's actually on YouTube. You should check that out. They do have some sort of emotions.
Yes, and he says not the same again as what we would consider with ours, but he said, if you look at a plant that he's talking about an experiment, if you were to have two plants and talk cruelly to one plant and kindly to another plant, he says you're going to see a reaction to it. Because again, it's not, you can't hurt a plant's feelings in the sense that if you are, it's a vibrational thing. So he says it's what you are speaking, because we are manifesting, has a vibrational quality, and that's how the plants are receiving everything, is through vibration. So it's not understanding that you're hurting my feelings. So he says it's the plant's not sitting there turning to the other plant and going, that guy's a real jerk. He just ripped that leaf off me.
Oh. Well, one of the things they showed in this Secret Life of Plants was the scientists got this whole contraption where at a certain time, this little container of brine shrimp would be poured into a beaker of boiling water. And then he went on a walk because he didn't want to influence it. And he had plants hooked up to sensors, kind of like, almost like brain waves, like an EEG, but not, because they don't have brains. And at the time the thing poured, the brine shrimp went into the boiling waters, all those plants just essentially on the sensor started screaming. And there was another one where the scientists all had white coats, but one of them went to this plant in front of all the other plants and ripped it apart and then left. And then one by one, each scientist marches in front of the plants, and only when the murderer passed, came to the room, did the sensors go off and they started just screaming. So maybe their emotions, like fear, do they have the ability to feel fear?
Yes. Yes. So he said again, it's all by vibration, and it's how they receive it, because there's not, there's no, he's like, there's no mind.
So there's no
mind.
mind that says, I'm afraid because I don't want that to be me. It's just
right, but it's reacting. Right.
Okay.
So it's vibration and reaction, but the mind is not there to comprehend what's happening.
What about inanimate objects like rocks? They don't have emotions, do they?
No. He says that, yeah, he says you're not going to get much from a rock.
No. Can you describe the emotions of any alien group that you might think we'll find interesting?
The first thing he just said was the Palladians are known for a soft, they can be direct, but he says emotionally, very empathic, very soft and healing. He's saying that a lot of healers and light workers that are highly empathic and sensitive have a Palladian, or have had a Palladian lifetime or several lifetimes as a Palladian, have that connection.
Okay.
He says that they're one of the most, he says not necessarily emotional, because there are other ones, but that they are the ones that understand human emotion the best.
Okay.
He's also saying that there are other races. I'm just trying to get him to show me, if he can tell me which race that is that he's talking about. He's just saying Orion, in Orion, or in Orion's belt.
Mm-hmm.
He's talking about there being beings that are studying our ascension process, and also studying our reactiveness, how we heal.
Okay.
That they're learning about how we heal, because the emotions are not present on all planets the way it is on Earth. So there is interest. Erik's just saying that we're receiving a lot of help during the ascension period, but there's also a lot of observation, a lot of learning that we're providing as well.
Okay, so what's the weirdest emotional style of one alien race?
Okay. He says that this is Arcturian, and he's talking about connecting feet.
What?
As something that he's showing me. I'm serious.
It's
He's
like their handshake,
showing me.
huh?
Yeah, he's showing me like as a pair, like as a love, as a pair, as a connection. He shows laying down like lengthwise and connecting foot to foot.
Wow.
And he says it's an emotional transmission.
So people here who have foot fetishes probably have had lives in Arcturia, or whatever you call it. Arcturus. I don't know.
He says, he goes, Mom, you're right. He goes, not just from that, but he goes, there is some of that, because there's a lot of little things that we've had many lifetimes. He says a lot of people that maybe haven't had as many lifetimes on Earth and have had more in star systems may have a lot of little, what they would consider quirks or oddities that they don't really have a place to put it, that really has something to do with their other lifetimes.
Wow. How about coprophilia?
Yeah.
That's kind of weird. Eating poop.
What is that?
Eating each other's poop.
Oh my gosh.
Well, anyway, we won't get into that. But, you know, a lot of people say I'm Pleiadian, but really, or I'm whatever. But really, we don't originate from any place, because we always were, right? I mean, there's no beginning to, so it's just like we've been in Pleiades more than we have in other places. It's like
yes, and that's really what Erik says. There are some souls that maybe had and he says that you can, if you're one of these souls, you will know it in your gut if you feel that you really have a hard time belonging on Earth. He goes, that is what we would consider a starseed, but there are some people that really have had more lifetimes on other planets. But the truth is that we've all been everything. We've been everything in every circumstance. And he says, so you might feel something more in one direction because maybe that influences some part of your life right now. And that might be why you feel it more. But in another lifetime, you may have tapped into something else because that was something that had to be dealt with, healed, or understood.
Yeah. All right. One more question. Well, before, anything else on aliens at all?
He just says they're really cool.
Okay. Awesome. That's funny. All right. So what would we look like if we had never developed a language, a spoken or a written language? What would our emotions be like? I mean, anything.
He's actually saying that we would have been further along with developing our emotions because there would have been a lot more focus that was put to expression. So he says, think of how easily it is for somebody to just flip off some words to somebody, or to just respond and just say something like, yeah, whatever, or things like that. He said that when there is no ability to speak or to communicate with the mouth, one has to find other ways to communicate. He says, for example, look at autism, look at different people in our society that don't communicate with their mouths. Well, they look for other ways to communicate. That often will increase the sensitivities in other ways, will increase those, those parts that maybe get ignored a little bit because one's in the front of themselves, and he says
Yeah.
doing this all the time.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that's really interesting. Because, emotions, it is a form of communication, right? It's more powerful. Are you able to communicate more through emotions than through words?
Well, he said, yes, we are emotional beings.
Yeah.
And so emotions, love is the highest frequency.
Yeah.
And so with being emotional beings, that's who we are in the first place. That's what we are intended to be. And that's what we are coming back into in ascension, is coming back into the heart space and coming into not pushing emotions away, but accepting them, understanding them, and releasing the ones that we don't need.
It's pretty cool. Anything else you want to add before we close?
No, he's all smiles and a little silly today.
Aww.
He's just all like, he's very excited. His energy's right up. And he's got my cats all wound up because they're bouncing all over the place.
All right, well, thank you, Erik. I love you. Thank you, Michelle. I love you. And you guys check her out at
love you.
thehealing-arts.com. I'll put it right here. Bye, everybody.
Awesome. Thank you. Bye. Erik says bye.
Bye.